My wife cheated on me because of my brother's deception, who was always jealous of me, but when I told them the truth they asked me for forgiveness. So I've been with my wife for years, since we were young and figuring out life. We got engaged a while ago, and our relationship was strong. She's a great person, and I knew from the start she was the one I wanted to be with. But the first time I brought her to meet my family, I noticed my brother acting strange. He didn't talk much, just looked at her for too long. I ignored it at first, thinking he was just being shy or awkward. Then I realized he liked her. He really liked her. My brother has been jealous of me since we were kids. He'd get upset over small things. I'd get a new toy for my birthday, and he'd be mad for days. I'd do well in school, and he'd act like I'd done something wrong. There was no reason for it, just jealousy. Our parents tried to talk to him about it when we were growing up, but he never changed. I thought he'd stop as we got older. I was wrong. When he met my fiancée, that jealousy came back, and it was worse than before. He didn't just want my life, he wanted her. He started acting strange around us. He'd show up more often, ask her questions, and try to get her to notice him. I'd see him watching her when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Then he started dating her sister. Her sister looks a lot like her, same dark hair, same sharp eyes. It was obvious why he picked her. He couldn't be with my fiancée, so he chose someone who reminded him of her. It bothered me, but I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to cause problems over something I wasn't sure about. Things started getting worse after my brother began dating my fiancée's sister. He didn't hide his feelings as well as he thought. He'd make comments about my fiancée when we were all together, stuff like how she was too good for me or how lucky I was. It wasn't friendly joking. It felt pointed. I'd tell him to knock it off, but he'd just laugh and act like I was overreacting. My fiancée didn't say much about it, but I could tell it made her uncomfortable. She'd get quiet when he was around, and I hated that. He didn't stop there. He'd call her sometimes, asking random questions about her day or her plans. She'd tell me about it later, confused why he was so interested. I didn't trust him. Never had, really. Growing up, he'd take my stuff, lie to get me in trouble, anything to make himself look better. Now it was her he was after, and I knew he'd do whatever it took to mess things up between us. My parents saw it too. They pulled him aside once after a family dinner and told him to back off. He didn't listen. He just got sneakier. His relationship with her sister didn't last long. They fought all the time, mostly because he couldn't stop talking about my fiancée. Her sister would get mad, and he'd brush it off like it was no big deal. Eventually, she dumped him. I wasn't surprised. He didn't care about her. He was just using her to stay close to my fiancée. After the breakup, he got worse. He'd show up at our place uninvited, saying he just wanted to hang out. I'd tell him to leave, and he'd argue, acting like I was the bad guy. I knew he wasn't going to give up. After his breakup with my fiancée's sister, my brother got more desperate. He didn't have an excuse to be around us anymore, but that didn't stop him. He'd text my fiancée random things, asking about her work, her family, stuff he had no business knowing. She'd show me the messages, and I'd tell her to ignore him. She did, but he kept going. I blocked his number on her phone myself after a while. That pissed him off. He called me from a different number, yelling about how I was cutting him out of the family. I told him he was crossing lines, and he hung up. I thought that might be the end of it, but I underestimated him. He'd been planning something bigger. He started talking to my fiancée behind my back, using a new number she didn't recognize. He told her I'd been cheating on her. He said it was with her sister, of all people. He made up details, like times I'd supposedly been with her when my fiancée wasn't around. He even said he'd seen us together. It was all lies, but he sold it hard. She didn't know what to think. She trusted me, but he planted enough doubt to shake her. She confronted me one night, asking if it was true. I told her no, explained how I'd never do that, especially not with her sister. She wanted to believe me, but I could see she was torn. My brother had gotten to her. She didn't say much after that, just packed a bag and left. I didn't know where she went at first. I called her phone, but she didn't answer. Later, I found out my brother had picked her up. He'd offered her a place to stay, said he'd help her figure things out. That's when I knew he wasn't just jealous, he was dangerous. My brother didn't waste time after my fiancée left. He took her to his place, telling her I'd been lying to her for months. He said I'd been sneaking around with her sister the whole time he'd been dating her. He told her I'd laughed about it, like it was some game. She was hurt and angry, and he kept feeding her more lies to keep her there. I didn't know any of this at first. I was just trying to figure out where she'd gone. I called her friends, her parents, anyone I could think of. No one knew anything. Then I got a call from her. She didn't say much, just that she cheated on me with my brother. Her voice was flat, like she didn't even care. I didn't believe it. It didn't sound right. I asked her what was going on, but she hung up. I sat there, trying to process it. My brother had always wanted her, but I didn't think she'd ever go for him. Something was off. I called her sister next, hoping she'd know what was happening. She picked up, and before I could say much, she told me the truth. My brother had convinced my fiancée to make that call. It was his idea, some twisted revenge plan. He told her I deserved it for what I'd done with her sister. She believed his lies about me and went along with it, thinking it'd hurt me back. Her sister found out because my brother bragged about it to a mutual friend, thinking he'd won. He didn't know the friend would tell her. When her sister heard, she was furious, not just at him, but at my fiancé too. She said my brother had manipulated everything, and my fiancé had fallen for it. After my fiancé's sister told me the truth, I didn't know what to feel. I was mad at my brother for setting this up, mad at my fiancé for believing him, and mad at myself for not seeing it coming. Her sister said she talked to my fiancé after finding out, told her everything my brother had done. She said my fiancé broke down, realizing she'd been played. She didn't know what to do, so she stayed at my brother's place, too ashamed to come home. I didn't call her. I needed time to think. My brother, though, didn't get what he wanted. He thought my fiancé would turn to him after the call, maybe start something with him for real. She didn't. She wouldn't even talk to him after she found out the truth. He tried to push her, saying they could be together now that I was out of the picture. She told him to leave her alone. He got angry, started yelling, saying she'd ruined everything. Then he just left her there and went back to his own house. He didn't care about her anymore once he saw she wouldn't go along with his plan. I found out later that she sat in his apartment for hours, alone, trying to figure out how it all went wrong. Her sister called her again, told her to come home, but she didn't want to face anyone yet. She felt stupid for trusting him. I didn't know any of this at the time. I was still piecing it together from what her sister told me. My brother had lost her sister, and lost any chance of pretending he was the good guy. He didn't call me, and I didn't call him. I wasn't ready to deal with him yet. A couple days after the call, my fiancée showed up at our house. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there with her bag. I let her in, and she sat down. She told me everything. She said my brother had convinced her I'd cheated, told her all those lies about me and her sister. She admitted she'd been too upset to question it at first. She said she made the call to hurt me because she thought I'd hurt her. When her sister told her the truth, she realized my brother had set it all up. She said she was sorry. She kept saying it, like she thought it'd fix things. I listened, but I didn't say much. I was still angry, not just at her, but at how easy it had been for my brother to break us apart. She told me she'd cut him off completely, that she never wanted to see him again. She said she messed up by trusting him over me. I didn't know what to tell her. I just nodded and let her talk. Later that day, my brother called me. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. He started talking fast, said he was sorry, that he didn't mean for it to go this far. He admitted he'd lied to her, said he just wanted her to see I wasn't good enough. He claimed he'd loved her since the beginning and thought she'd pick him if I was out of the way. He said he knew he'd screwed up, that he'd lost everything. Her sister, me. He asked me to forgive him. I didn't say anything. I hung up. He didn't deserve a response after what he'd done. After my brother's call, I didn't talk to him again. My fiancée stayed at the house, but things weren't the same. She kept trying to make it right, cooking dinner, asking how my day was, stuff she hadn't done in a while. I could tell she felt guilty. I didn't push her away, but I didn't let her in either. I needed time to figure out if I could trust her again. She believed him so fast, even after everything we'd been through. That stuck with me. Her sister came over a few days later. She wanted to clear the air. She said she'd never been involved with me, that my brother's lies had hurt her too. She was mad at my fiancé for not checking with her first, but they'd already talked it out. She told me she'd warned my fiancé about my brother months ago, said he'd been too obsessed with her from the start. My fiancé hadn't listened then. Now she knew her sister was right. They hugged it out before she left, but I could see it'd take time for them to fully fix things. I started thinking about my brother more. He'd always been like this, jealous, petty, willing to hurt me over nothing. I remembered how he'd stolen my bike as a kid and crashed it, then blamed me. How he told our parents I'd started fights he picked. This was just the worst version of it. He tried to take my whole life this time. I didn't feel sorry for him losing everything. He'd brought it on himself. My fiancée asked me what I wanted to do about him. I told her I wasn't ready to decide. She didn't push it. Weeks went by, and my fiancée kept trying to fix us. She'd sit with me at night, telling me she'd never doubt me again. She said she'd learned her lesson, that my brother's lies had opened her eyes. I wanted to believe her, but it wasn't that simple. I'd spent years building something with her, and he'd torn it apart in days. She'd helped him do it, even if she didn't mean to. I didn't know if I could get past that. We still slept in the same bed, but I felt distant. My parents called me one afternoon. They'd heard bits of what happened. My brother had told them his version, leaving out the worst parts. I filled them in on the rest. They were quiet for a while, then said they weren't surprised. They'd seen him act this way before, just never this bad. They told me they'd talk to him again, told him he'd gone too far. He'd cried, said he was sorry, asked them to tell me that. They didn't defend him. They said it was up to me what happened next. I thanked them and hung up. I saw my brother one more time after that. He showed up at the house, uninvited. My fiancée was there, and she froze when she saw him. He looked rough, tired, unshaven, like he hadn't been taking care of himself. He started apologizing again, saying he'd ruined his own life and didn't expect me to forgive him. He just wanted me to hear him out. I didn't let him finish. I told him to leave and not come back. He stood there for a second, then walked away. My fiancée didn't say anything, just watched him go. It's been months since everything went down. My fiancée and I are still together, but it's not like it was. We've talked a lot, about trust, about what happened, about whether we can move forward. She's tried hard to prove she's sorry, and I can see she means it. I've started to let her back in, little by little. We're not engaged anymore. I took that off the table for now. She didn't argue. She knows it'll take time to rebuild what we had, if we even can. Some days I think we will. Others I'm not sure. My brother's out of my life. I haven't spoken to him since he showed up that day. My parents say he's been keeping to himself, barely leaves his place. He lost his job a while back, couldn't focus after everything fell apart. They don't push me to reach out, and I don't plan to. He crossed a line I can't forgive. Her sister's doing fine. She's dating someone new, someone who's not tied up in all this mess. She and my fiancé are on better terms now, but they're not as close as they used to be. Looking back, I see how my brother's jealousy built up to this. It wasn't just about her, it was about me, about everything he thought I had that he didn't. He tried to take it all, and he ended up with nothing. I don't feel bad for him. I'm still sorting out what's left for me and her. We're taking it slow, seeing where it goes. That's all I've got for now. Life's messy, and I'm just trying to figure it out.